A very warm welcome to the participants of the Proteomics Advanced Winter School 2021. Presented by Proteomics Lab, Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay. Day 6, Quantitative Proteomics, Label-Free. Lecture 1, Introduction to Quantitative Proteomics.
In this session, in this lecture, I will first try to give you a very quick recap of our study session about some of the concepts of mass spectrometry. Then I'll emphasize about why quantitative proteomics is important, and especially MS-based quantitative proteomics, which is currently highly used by the whole scientific community. We'll also show you the live run of some samples for the label-free quantification. And if some time permits, I will give you some updates for the mass spectrometry-based HPP and the guidelines. So just to recap some of the things which we talked yesterday, because we will be building further from there. I spoke to you about your workflow of MS-based proteomics, which involves having in-gel or in-solution digestion. Then you want to have the, take these peptides, clean them up, quantify them, and separate them using liquid chromatography, nano-LC or UHPLC. And you have seen the emphasis from Professor Kuster regarding the need to optimize the micro-LC or nano-LC and compare the coverage, right? So how crucial this parameter could be. And then you want to ionize those peptides coming from the chromatography using different type of ionization source, separate them with the different type of mass analyzers, analyze either MS1 or MSMS or MSN type of data set. For doing that, any mass spectrometer has three major sources: ionization source, mass analyzer, and detector, and few accessory components like sample inlet, data out with the signal processing, and some of the instrumental control processing units. We also looked at how this data is theoretically, the polypeptide chains, how they are broken with the collision energy, and the B and Y ions are being formed. And when we analyze this, then we were able to see that, when you are looking at the data for the protein identification, you can actually go back to each of the peptide and look at their fragmentation pattern. And you can look at the intensities of B and Y ions and appreciate how good the quality of the data is, right? In my next slide, I'm going to show you a couple of configurations, and you have to speak out quickly by unmuting yourself that what this configuration is, what type of mass spectrometer it is.
It's a QTOF.
Name, your name.
QTOF. Ankush Gupta, QTOF.
Good morning, Dr. Ankush. Very good start. What is this instrument? Next person.
This is
some other
QTOF.
Triple quadruple.
Who is there?
Quad.
Sudarshan triple quadruple.
Who is speaking now?
Triple quad.
Please tell your name and then write answer.
Sudarshan said, sir, triple quadruple.
All right. Good morning, Sudarshan. So great. Okay.
So,
Others,
this
please.
is Ankush Toff.
All right. So Dr. Ankush and Sudarshan, now you have done well. So you have to mute yourself. Now, chance for the next person for the last configuration. What is this instrument?
Orbitrap. Orbitrap fusion.
Who is there?
And Dr. Kavita Pandey.
All right, very good. So now, among these ones, which one is odd man out of the four?
Orbitrap. Ankush Orbitrap.
And why is that? Somebody else?
I think, sir, triple quadruple.
Okay, and why could be that?
Because it is mainly used for targeted quantitation.
And if I say that even using the fusion kind of instrument, you can still do even targeted, because you can do PRM type of work.
But in triple quadruple, discovery kind of work will be cannot be done.
All right, so that's a right guess. I think one possibility could be triple quad is outlier here, given the nature of that. It can only do quantification. Others can do discovery work as well. So you are Dr. Sudarshan, right? All right, who is next? Can somebody else still figure out why Orbitrap is the outlier here? In a different.
Ankush. I'm telling that Orbitrap has a higher resolution because you have orbital movement of these peptide ions, and so there is a better detection, and it has 3 ion traps. So, and you can store and concentrate the peptides at different junctions, and it has multiple utilities in terms of metabolomics and all other applications.
All right, you're quite good to go. Only thing is, I'm still looking for a specific term here, and that is somebody else can help me.
Resonance frequency based. Here the identification is based on the principle of Fourier transformer, which is not in the case of other instruments.
All right, good. If I just say that, okay, I'm looking at more in terms of hybrid technology versus something else, then what is the deal here?
It's a triple fusion, basically. That means it's a fusion technology.
It is a tribrid technology. So
yeah,
I think your indications were correct, but the term I was looking at the tribrid technology. Yeah, that's a hybrid technology. Now, among all of these configurations, if we have to think about, like, if I want to say, like, what is common across all these 4, what could be the guess?
Ionization,
dissociation and ionization.
Ionization is same across all these.
You people have added 2 more things. I am looking for one more thing. So please think one more component is common across all these 4 aspects.
CID.
Collision phase.
Dissociation.
Yeah.
Dissociation.
That people have already mentioned now. So let's look into something else in terms of mass analyzers.
Signal processing.
Sorry? Okay, so I think most of you have already answered the several things which is correct answers. One more thing to keep in mind here that quadrupole is one of the most common configuration which is used in variety of mass spectrometer except in the multi-TOF based configurations. And why multi is always interface with the TOF? Why not I had also the quadrupole here with multi? Or if I want to make a new mass spec with multi with quadrupole, why it is not possible, or is it possible?
Multi works on single charge species, so you have to, I don't know, maybe.
You are absolutely right.
Yeah.
For the M/Z ratios are very high, the overall mass is very large, and only TOF can accommodate that. Other mass analyzers like quadrupole has very limited window. They cannot accommodate that. So that's where you see in other 3 mass specs, quadrupole is there, whereas in the multi-TOF, that's not there. All right, everybody's awake now. So good morning, everyone. We will now continue and discuss about our points about the broad field of proteomics, especially DIA versus DDA. And then I will move on to specifically LFQ based work. So I did not talk much in the DIA yesterday. As you go along in the in the meeting and in the presentations, you will get more talks hearing about how these technologies are evolving. But just to give you some sense that when we are going to do label-free quantification, we are going to look at all the whole window of mass to charge. In case of DIA, we are selectively looking at a specific M/Z region from 400 to 1000, and each window of 400 to 500, 500 to 600, and likewise 900 to 1000 is high resolution data being acquired to build the libraries. And that could be then when you run your sample, you can actually overlay those and try to acquire the data. So therefore, overall coverage can be much higher and data resolution and quality could be much higher. In our own personal experience, when we ran same brain tumor tissue on the LFQ versus DIA, the numbers were 3000 versus 4000, that kind of difference was there. So broadly, just to recap on the various things which I spoke on DDA and DIA. DDA, data dependent acquisition, where mass spectrometer selects most intense peptide ions as a precursor, going to take in the collision cell for fragmentation, and then that fragmentation pattern being analyzed in the second mass analyzer. In case of DIA, it is selecting the narrow mass window region of the precursors and then all the precursors of that window MSMS data is being acquired. So therefore, it is you are looking at more stepped manner of the mass to charge ratio and collecting all the precursor information for those regions. So coming to now quantitative proteomics, I hope we are all on same page of what we have been discussing so far. Moving on to the quantitative proteomics, while we have spent some time on understanding the gel-based and the 2D and DIGE, one could say that I can go for that as well. So why I need to do the gel-free quantitation? But given the various issues which people have observed with the gel-based proteomics, especially the I personally feel my one take will be that despite doing all the hard work of identifying the right proteins, still many times you can't even establish their identity. You can see good nice 3D peaks of those protein spots, but at the end when you do mass spec, you are not able to identify those because the peptide which is available on that spot is very low. So low copy number is there, and you are not able to characterize the proteome using mass spectrometers. And of course, there are many sample preparation issues of protein solubility, membrane protein, dynamic range of the protein abundance, etc. And reproducibility was something of a concern, which is partially overcome using DIGE technology. But given the so much laborious procedure of doing gels, and still inherent to a lot of failures. And finally, if you're not able to identify 50% protein because of mass spec, issues of sensitivity, then you are, not very happy that all the efforts have not fructified well. In case of mass spectrometry based quantitative proteomics, the major advantage I feel is that since you are acquiring MSMS spectra for the entire proteome, whatever you are able to analyze, so anything which you are going to find as a differentially expressed, and by doing statistics you find it significant, you already have MSMS information for those, and you can actually establish identity 100%. In this case you have 50%. In that case 50 means a 50 to 70% success depending on the your sample type in gel based. But in the mass spec it will be 100% identification because you have already acquired the data. So there is literally no doubt on identity of those. So as a result, mass spectrometry based quantitative proteomics have come forward as a very strong platform of doing proteomics based quantitation with much ease and with much more robustness, with much more precision and much more reproducibility. So people have tried different ways of labeling the proteins and peptides and use those information of labeling to compare what happens to a label in my control condition versus a label in my test condition. So if you think about, we talked about DIGE, which is going to do the Cy-DIGE binding and the lysine, and you're going to use Cy3, Cy5 comparison in your quantitation. Similar concept actually got started in the mass spectrometry based quantitative proteomics as well, which actually started with isotope coded affinity tag or ICAT, ICAT light and ICAT heavy tags. And then people thought that okay, tags could actually be utilized as a good way to provide the basis for the quantification, and these tags could be read and identified in the mass spec run at MSMS level. So then the whole field started exploring variety of tags from metabolic labels to chemical labels to enzymatic synthetic peptide standards. So variety of approaches are there. I will actually talk more about the label based in tomorrow's lecture. Today we want to get more focus on label free, but because I do want to give you the comparative idea about label based and label free, so I'll be at least briefly giving you some overview, but more detail about the tagging strategies and chemistry and mechanism. All that I'm going to talk in tomorrow's session about label based. So today whole day will be more focusing on the LFQ. So in the label free, we are looking at the peptide peak intensities coming from the chromatography, and also the spectral count, which is going to indicate us the abundance of my given peptide from control versus test condition. In label based, people have tried to label the different samples using metabolic labeling methods or chemical labeling methods, and these are still very popular methods. Label free is still emerging, but having a lot of its own potential, which as we go along, you'll be able to discuss and appreciate that. So in label based quantitation, because as I said, I'll just give you a brief overview so that you are tuned on that. But all this I'm going to talk in more detail tomorrow. There are different type of tagging strategies have come forward, and many scientists have put in very good effort thinking about how to label proteins either at amino acid level or N-terminal peptide level or C-terminal peptide level, which could be utilized in the mass spectrometer, and then that tags could be used for the quantification. So different amino acid based labeling methods were directly inspired from the DIGE based methods, as I said, because the DIGE labeling was on the lysine amino acid, and people thought can we use something similar like that. So IECAT or isotope coded affinity tag started with the cysteine labeling, and likewise variants of IECAT and other technologies came forward. So I will skip this detail for tomorrow. N-terminal peptide labeling essentially started that since amino acids may have bias, can we pick up only the N-terminal peptide sequence and label that for the with iTrack or TMT, isobaric tag for relative and absolute quantification, or tandem mass tag. These are still most powerful N-terminal peptide labeling based methods and very commonly used in the field. C-terminal peptide labeling is based on esterification or proteolysis methods, are less commonly used, but are available for certain applications. So I hope this gives you idea for variety of in vitro labeling methods which can be used. We will talk more about ICAT and iTrack and TMTs tomorrow. But because I want to give you comparison of label based and label free, I would like to show you this slide about tandem mass tagging strategies. Let's say you have 6 samples to compare, 3 control and 3 treatment. In fact, you have been given the data set for the raw data of mass spec, which is not TMT labeled, but 6 samples are like that. 3 samples are control, 3 samples are treatment, right? And so if you were to do TMT based experiment, you are going to label each of these samples separately from 6 different tags. TMT kits come in different type of 2-plex, 6-plex, 10-plex, and now I think they have 14-plex. So different type of tags can be used for multiplexing capability. So after doing your protein extraction, making the peptides, labeling the peptides N-terminal with the TMT tags, you are going to pool all of them and mix them together. So keep this point in mind that here you are actually pooling all the peptides from all the conditions and then going to run only one sample in the mass spec. And at the MS level, these same tag, whatever you have used here, are going to come apparent and going to be visible in the in your run, which are the reporter ions, which you can see that for quantification. So keep this point in mind that here we are labeling them independently, but we are still mixing them together, and that pool is going to be done. Additionally, in addition to the in vitro labeling, there are several in vivo labeling methods have also been used. People have tried to use stable isotope tagging methods, especially 15N media or culture-derived isotope tags, or SciLec, which has been one of the most popular methods for in vivo labeling, is stable isotope labeling by amino acids in cell culture. So again, SciLec I will talk tomorrow, but SciLec remains one of the gold standard if you are doing in vivo labeling methods, and it's quite reproducible and having so many advantages over in vitro labeling as well. But overall, you are actually doing some sort of stable isotope tagging. So all of these are tagging methods when you are incorporating some tags or reagents in your protein or peptide, which can be used for the differential expression analysis. Now let's move on to the label-free quantification or LFQ. So what I gave you was some overview of a label-based quantification, but that will be major focus for tomorrow's session. Today, what we will talk now mainly about LFQ, and we are going to do some hands-on on the LFQ. And so as we have 2 different sessions on data analysis of LFQ dataset, which has been provided to all of you. So LFQ, as the name says, label free. So you are not adding any label on your protein samples, right? So you have, let's say, the 6 sample, 3 control, 3 treatment. Each one of those you have digested separately, and you are going to run them separately. You are not going to pool them. What I just showed you for the TMT type of the tagging based methods. Here you are going to run the samples individually, one at a time. So what you are looking at how best one could quantify the proteome just by exploiting the liquid chromatography parameters, which are coupled with the tandem mass spectrometers. So again, the power and utility of liquid chromatography, what was emphasized in Professor Bernard Kutzer's talk yesterday, is heavily used. And now if your chromatography is reproducible and good and fast, then I think you can do a lot of comparison of peptide abundance just in the label-free manner as well. So the workflow, which I have also showed you earlier, is very simple, right? You are just extracting the protein, digesting the protein. For doing digestion, you are performing several steps, which we have shown yesterday, involving the, if you're doing N-gel, you are going to do first destaining, followed by reduction, alkylation, and enzyme treatment. Zip tipping, drying the peptide, reconstituting peptide in formic acid acetonitrile, running them in the mass spec, generate MS1, MS2 data sets. This is what exactly LFQ workflow is. Very simple. Every sample has to run independently. Every sample has to run one by one, right? So 6 samples, if we are giving you data, those 6 samples have been run one at a time. And all these 6 samples data sets are acquired separately. And we are going to now compare them across that how good the data looks like for quantitation. So in label-free quantitative proteomics, we are not integrating any stable isotopes, which is being used in the label-based methods. We are just trying to align the intensity profile from the liquid chromatography whenever the peptides are coming out, eluting out from the LC part. We are trying to make a hypothesis here that in my control versus treatment, the same peptide which is coming at the same retention time, if my chromatography is reproducible, if at 20 minutes a peptide comes in control condition, at 20 minutes the same peptide will come in treatment condition as well. But it is possible that peptide abundance is different in the treatment as compared to control. But it has to align, the retention time has to align, then only you can compare. There are 2 spectra here of peptide and there are 20 spectra there in the treatment. So as I mentioned, you are expecting that these peptides are going to ionize equally in different samples. And the number of fragmentation events are also going to be similar, and the chromatography is going to be reproducible, which can then be utilized for the relative quantification. So it means everything, these 6 samples you have to run in exactly identical conditions. And also there are some more synthetic peptide and standards now. One is known as IRT peptide, which is for retention time monitoring. Those type of standards are being run to monitor that your chromatography is reproducible. You can also spike in some other internal standard, which you can monitor their intensities for different run to run. So these are different things which will help you to compare your samples across, right? But in LFQ, now one could have actually 2 different type of approaches to do the data analysis. That is really tricky bit. I must say that the approach is very lucrative, because you are reducing a lot of cost for the kits and reagents, and cumbersome procedure of labeling sometimes gets failed, all kind of issues, and the cost is the most bottleneck over there. But here data analysis becomes quite challenging. Like you are assuming that from the chromatographic elution peak, those are quite reproducible and they are coming in the same position on control and your treatment. So now you're going to compare their either peak intensities of these peptides or how many spectra is coming, spectral counting you are doing. So there are 2 different school of thoughts of analyzing the data using label-free quantification. So briefly, like here we are taking each sample at the in its own entity independently. We are processing them separately, and then we are digesting them separately. We are running them in the mass spec whenever we get a chance. But whenever you will run these another sample for comparison, you will keep the same parameter for LC and MSMS. Now think about, many of you are quite much into the clinical proteomics work and veterinary proteomics work, and a lot of clinical samples, cell line, these kind of samples are being used. And there is so much issues of sample storage and all. And as we talked on the day 1, what is really ideal condition that if we could collect the samples, process them immediately, get the protein extracts, do QC check, digest the peptides, clean the peptide, dry them up, and store them at -80. Now think about in how many projects of your clinical proteomics you want to get 100 sample, 50 control, 50 disease individual. In 3 days or 5 days or a week time, can you get 100 sample? Nobody can get that, right? So you have to wait for several months to actually recruit all your patients. So by the time you started recruiting your healthy individual, healthy volunteers, and maybe some of the disease on first month, by the time you finish your entire recruitment and all the sample, it will be 6 months to 1 year, right? It could be more or even longer to be more practical, the kind of disease which you are looking at. So those samples which were stored on the first month versus the sample which are collected on the 12th month are very different. Like, one sample got stored for 12 months, other sample got stored for 1 month. So you have done quantitative proteomics yourself to start with without even doing any quantitation because of degradation, lot of storage issues which are there. So what is really ideal that if you can not only prepare the sample but also run in the mass spec right away, and you try to keep the whole thing in a shortest time window of a week or so. And whenever you are going to get the next batch of sample, maybe after 2 weeks time, you again process those and run them and acquire the data and save it in the libraries. So now what you are doing, you are actually making very high quality peptide libraries week after week from the very fresh sample. The data quality is going to be beautiful. You're going to see very good coverage, no peptide, degradation issues, stability issues, all things will be taken care of. And you're going to see very high quality data, which is going to be digitally stored. Now this data over the 6 months to 12 months is going to be stored for your 100 patient samples or 150 control 50 patient samples. After that, now you can analyze them as you want to do that. This is, I think, the most beautiful part and most robust part of doing LFQ based work, because you are not relying on everything to run at the same time, which cannot be case for the label based quantification, because in label based your experimental strategies are in such a way that you want to utilize the labels very well. If you are doing 6-plex or 10-plex experiment, you are going to use one of the channel for doing the pooling strategy for making a internal pool standard, and then you are going to run remaining channels for the different sample type to compare. So you'd like to do as many sample as possible. Many times we prepare all the 50 sample, 100 sample, and then do 10-plex TMT and for all these 100 sample and try to get the whole experiment done at once, so that there is more reproducibility at the labeling stage, at the tagging part, and analyzing the data. But what we are still losing out the time of sample collection and the storage, right? So the LFQ in that way, like personally, I feel, especially if since we are working on the clinical proteomics project, and like many of you, we also encounter the sample issues, sample collection and storage problems. We feel this is actually very powerful, because you are actually not going to wait for a long time. You can keep acquiring high quality data, keep storing them, and then at the end you can analyze them based on one of the two methods, which are, one is known as extracted ion chromatogram or XIC method. Again, you are running your, let's say, state A, state B. You are finding the same retention time. What is the intensity of the chromatogram? You can see that, and you are trying to measure that peak area and calculating the mean intensities across all the peptides for each of the protein in the biological sample to decide the protein quantification. So again, this is something beautiful, which is very easy. If you see, like, your chromatography is coming reproducible very nicely, you can do the quantification using XIC method. Or one could look at the spectral counting method. It means you are looking at number of MS spectra generated from each protein in your state A versus state B. You are looking at how many fragmentation events I can measure for that, and I'm going to combine all the fragmentation event for this particular state A versus this particular state B, and going to use that to measure the abundance of my biological sample A versus biological sample B. So this is another way of doing quantification, spectral counting based method. So broadly, what I have been speaking so far, if I summarize, we are trying to look at protein quantification, especially peptide-centric quantification methods, where peptides being prepared, and same peptide, either we are doing the labeling or we are running them without any label. The first most important factor which makes me more towards the label free is less cost of the kits and reagents, because those are really costly. Label based, of course, you are going to rely on the tag, so you have no other option than to buy those reagents. In label free, you are going to run individual sample. This is actually practically the most beautiful thing I have observed for the label free, that we are not going to wait for all the sample to come in to decide what can be my experimental design. So even if I'm unsure about what all questions I can address from those samples, I can still keep running them, acquiring the data. But in this case here, you're going to pool the sample from all the 6 condition or 10 condition. So your biology and question has to be defined beforehand, right? Then only you can address that. For instance, in the individual sample based work, we will share you some paper. We did one work on meningioma brain tumors, right? And these brain tumor patients, clinicians are doing variety of things on those, right? So they are doing radiology-based imaging. They are doing histopathology-based different markers screening. They are looking at different type of mutation burden. So a lot of data is available. So we got 3 different type of data set. Let's say we are comparing only meningioma brain tumor patients, which are around 100 patients are there. And what we got 3 type of information. One is that set of patients are having TERT mutation or NF2 mutation. Set of patients do not have that. Set of patients are having radiologically different image type as compared to other groups. So the one group which is having close to more tumor, that is skull based, other is supratentorial, which is far off from that, and that decides the aggressiveness of the tumor. So radiological observation is second observation, mutation observation was one observation. We also have all the idea for the immunohistochemistry and WHO grading of based on microscopy, which tells that these tumors may have grade 1, grade 2 or grade 3. So we got so many variables now. And now if we are running this 100 sample, I can analyze my data 3 times. One time just by looking at radiological features. Okay, some patients are skull based, some are supratentorial. Let's see is there any protein difference. Some second time I will reanalyze my same 100 data set just by looking at the mutation impact on these group of patients. And third time, whether the conventional transcriptomics and genomics based classification strategy is mapping towards the protein as well, or there are more subtypes are emerging based on the protein work. And we're actually very surprised that within the low grades we could see there are actually more subtypes of grade 1 as compared to what one would assume. So think about the power of some of these analysis, that you are just running same 100 sample, but you got to address now 3 different projects, 3 different things, totally different biology, which is many times is going to lag if you do the pooling strategies here, because you are relying on all of these samples and you are making experimental strategy based on only one question which you want to address. I hope I'm just trying to convey you a good balanced perspective about both of these methods. So therefore study design is very dynamic, very flexible. Many times since you are doing so much work, you want to be more dynamic because you can address more and more questions. Many times, you just started with the unknown things, and as soon you started getting more and more information, or you got even more RNA-seq data for the same patients, you have more refined hypothesis and you can reanalyze the data. Here you can't do that. It's more fixed study design. Only major drawback here in the label free is that every sample has to run independently. So if I am running 6 samples, which we are talking, those 6 samples are going to be run 2 hours gradient minimum, so 12 hours and 12 hours of blank. So 24 hours has gone just for running my one set of that 6 samples. Whereas here, since we are pooling all of these samples, so now after pooling, we are going to mix them together and going to run one sample as a one sample. So that is going to take only 2 hours. So now we have reduced our time of running these samples just for 2 hours as compared to 12 hours in this case. So we have pretty much reduced the mass spec load on that and the cost of running the sample on the mass spectrometer. Here, n number of samples can be keep added as you go along dynamically. Here only fixed number of samples can be analyzed, and data analysis is still one of the bottleneck here. Is still challenging. There is no one best method of analyzing this type of data. We will give you some glimpse of how to analyze this data using 2 different methods. Nevertheless, just with a caution that the fold changes what you get in the label-free methods may not be very accurate. Label-based methods are much more accurate in terms of the fold changes, because you know exactly the labeling of the peptide with the tags, and that quantification can be more accurate. Now, it's still why I prefer label-free, because my samples are still ready, the peptides are there. If I identify, after doing all the dynamic analysis, which you will see in MaxQuant or Proteome Discoverer, if I identify now the set of peptides are coming highly significant in my control versus test condition, so I can now go and take all of those to the targeted analysis. So because my peptides are ready, they're all label free, I can now take this data to the next level before I conclude my entire analysis. So it means I will not conclude just at this stage just by running LFQ, but rather I will go one step more of validating this data and try to validate that data with the targeted proteomics based workflow. It will just take the same sample, same workflow, just you're going to now focus on 100 peptide as compared to 5,000 peptides in this case, right? So that's where I will take this thing forward and generate more confident pipeline of the data. Here also you can do that. After analyzing the data, you can still go back to your original samples. You can get the peptide and proceed for targeted analysis. But in this case, it has becomes much more important to do that. Nevertheless, no reviewers are going to take any of your proteomics data at this stage, that you are found, 50 proteins up and down here, and you got 100 protein up and down here. Nobody will take that data acceptable for publication. So you have to go for validation anyways. So why not go with this pipeline? This is much more easier. Nevertheless, this could be all my personal opinion, what I'm talking right now, and I'm trying to still give you a very balanced view of it. Any one of you can happily challenge me about these points, which is very much possible, that there are many advantages of label based, which are still going to be more useful for many contexts. If you are using a very tight experiment of only a cell line being treated with a drug, and you got 3 biological replicate of that, you don't have too many samples, and you are just only going to do that in maybe in a week time. You are starting your cell culture work, and when you close the passaging and you collect the pellets, it will all be in the same time of that week, after 2-3 weeks time. So then you are actually going to be very tight in that experiment. You can still generate very good quality of the samples, and you can label those 6 samples maybe in 1 plex or 6 plex. That can be very powerful with a label based, very cost effective, runtime is less, data quality can be much more robust, right? So as I said, there could be pros and cons depending on the context. If you are going to look at large number of samples, more clinical sample variables, I think this could be powerful. If you have very tight experiment, very good hypothesis in mind, and less number of sample, label based could be good as well. But given the cost and many things, one would start with label free and go also for the label based. So what we are going to do now, I have talked enough, I think, but I talked more than what I thought I'll talk. We will now plan to show you some experiment. That's the idea for this session today. We are planning to do 2 experiments. One is we have prepared some tissue lysate, which we have seen in the course. The peptides were ready. We are going to now do 1 microgram injection of a tissue lysate, right? Just to give you idea, this is one of the tumor tissue lysate from a given cancer type. And we are going to run 2 hours of gradient, right? What we are going to do, we are going to inject the sample, and during the session in between, we will flash you live how the run is progressing, so that you can also keep track of and watch of the sample, how it comes. It may come good, it may come bad, we have no idea. It will be live sample, which we will try to run and show you as we go along. And in the subsequent session, I will also talk to you about the LC and MSMS parameters, so that you have also better idea about how to do the setting of those samples. Now, as we further get more time in the afternoon, we will run 1 more experiment, which is just for the BSA or standard protein, with very minimal injection of 200 nanogram or so, and that will be short gradient of 30 minutes. This file can be taken by you again to analyze the data yourself, because you will get more familiar in the daytime using MaxQuant and other software. So you can take some of these raw data set from us and play with it at your home and look for the analysis, how best, what kind type of protein you can get, and number of the protein and coverage, many things which we can then discuss that data and results tomorrow as well, right? So let's move on, and why don't we just, let me take you to the lab, and we try to inject these samples and start the experiment on the fusion. So please give me a minute. All right, so we will start our first experiment. Peptides are ready and quantified as we have spoken yesterday, and there is not much time right now to explain the instrument, but we will do that at some point. But what we will do right now on the nano LC, so again keep in mind what we are doing is still nano LC only. This is not what Professor Kuster yesterday mentioned about the micro LC. This is still nano LC only. But we are going to inject this sample, which is 1 microgram, right? Yes. All right. So Abhilash is going to inject this sample in the nano LC.
I have put the tube in V1. So here in nano LC we have different configuration of different tubes. So here we have put the plate of 8x6 configuration. So here I have put the vials in V1 position that we need to remember while putting the sample for analysis.
Can you briefly show what is the parameter for analysis?
Yes, sir, that I did.
All right, so we are actually going to inject the sample, and today what we will do, we will run this sample live, and we will keep flashing that sample after every 15-20 minutes so that all of you can watch how the run is progressing, right? As I mentioned, in the beginning there will be lot of lagging. There will be no peptide will be emitted out. So first 15-20 minutes you will just simply see there is nothing coming out. After that, some peptide will start coming out, and then it will reach to the over the 2 hours time gradient. You will see all the peptide coming out.
Yeah. So as you can see, I put the sample. This is the tissue sample, and I put the position that is at B1. And since as we showed you that we put 1 microgram of peptides. So before we have quantified, as Orgo showed you yesterday, we have quantified the peptide and it is 1 microgram per 4 microliter. So I put the injection volume as 4 microgram, and then I am putting this file for analysis. So this will be now analyzing. I'll show you the parameter what we put in the methods that we can show from here. So it is already opened. So these are our LFQ methods. Here I am opening one 2-hour gradient method that we have just used for analysis. Yes, so as you can see in my monitor here, we have both the method for LC, this is for thermo nano LC, and this is the method for fusion. So if I show you here, we have set the flow for 5 microliter per minute. Okay, and now I am going to show you the gradients that we will be.
Actually, what we will do, we will talk about these parameters in some time. Let's get the injection started, Abhilash. Okay, so let's start the injection. We will go through the parameter in the second session in more detail. So right now, can you just start?
Yeah, it is already started. Now you can see it is waiting for acquisition to start. So nano LC is taking its time. It will take 10 minutes to inject the sample, and after that it will start analyzing.
So what we will do, we will use any disk to show you the live monitoring of how the run progresses, right? So given that it takes time, we will take that time to continue talking about our workflows, and in between we'll flash you how the results are coming. So that way we are saving our time as well, and our experiments are running. So while we have given you some other data set also, but you can use this data what we generate today to analyze and do your own experiments, right? Your own data analysis. All right, so let me come back on the lecture.
Don't record, let it record.
Okay, so the run has started, and we will talk about the gradient and the parameters as we go along after the guest lecture. But just, I thought maybe a couple of minutes time, I think, since we are speaking about mass spec, and you have heard yesterday Professor Kuster, who had mapped the human proteome maps. And you have heard Dr. Ravi talking about some of these initiatives. I just thought to brush up here about how mass spectrometry has really played so important role about even mapping all the human proteins. You have seen Dr. Bernard Kuster study, and a similar work was done by Akhilesh Pandey. And then other initiatives were taken, which was Professor Matthias Wilhelm, you have seen, on the tissue-based stuff. And these works were really remarkable for our proteomics community, which has led the foundation of draft human proteome maps, which is being addressed with different type of activities of human proteome organization. You have been asked questions about different type of pillars of pathology, mass spec, knowledge based, antibody based pillars. And what is important here, what I wanted to present, that the guidelines for data analysis are very stringent. So when today you will be looking at data, you should pay attention to the different parameters which you can actually change yourself, right? So while analyzing the data, you have many options. And that's where I think it's a good idea for you to play with the things. And that's why we have shared you the raw data so that you can download and you can do your own analysis. Of course, we can show you some glimpse of the analysis, but you'll be better prepared if you play with these things. For instance, if you take at least 2 MS identified unique peptides or greater than 2, what is the number of protein you can see, which is coming significantly identified. Or if you change the amino acid length of the peptide, these are 6 mer or 7 mer or 8 mer or 9 mer, you will see again total number of proteins will be quite varying, based on how many you take as a uniquely mapped non-nested peptides. And likewise, whether they are close by or they're overlapping or they're non-nested will make these kind of change. Then you have to change the fast discovery rate, 1% versus 5%. So many of these things, if you play with it, you will then get an idea that a lot of data could be actually look very different from the same raw data. And that's where now it is very much important and mandatory to upload all the raw data of proteomics data set so that reviewers can actually analyze that data as well. And as a result, now recently all the human proteome data has been analyzed with a high stringency criteria, which was recently published in Nature Communications. And that really revealed that we have now quite a few protein, almost 17,000 protein, 17,800 protein, 90.5% of human proteome is mapped with the high stringent these guidelines, which I just spoke to you, and we'll be doing more max count analysis in the afternoon. And still there is quite a few of missing proteins here. And as you go along in your projects and your samples, you should keep an eye whether you can still discover some of these protein, identify them using mass spectrometer, and then you have a chance to actually contribute towards the missing proteome analysis and towards really contributing for the whole human proteome maps, right? That's all for this session. So I hope we are able to feel excited that we have come really long ways of looking at the proteomics and proteome maps. We have many innovative technologies in mass spectrometry of DDA and DIA based methods like data dependent, data independent acquisitions. We also have a lot of targeted based assays which have revolutionized the field for validation strategy, which we'll talk in the next week. And label-free quantification, I feel, is highly innovative given the many advantages which we have spoken about it. Nevertheless, the data analysis is going to be still very challenging, which we have to see how best to overcome that and gain confidence using different approaches. That's all for this lecture. Thank you very much for staying with me. Now I think Professor Chachu has already joined. So we have a next guest lecture with our esteemed colleague, Professor Utpal Chachu. If he's there and if he can hear me, I would like to now start next session with him. Many of you will have more curious questions for me, but I will be with you whole day. So we will be taking more things in the hands-on sessions after 12:30. So please do put your questions in the chat box if you are there. And but otherwise, I can take more live questions in the 12:30 session. With this, let me close this part. And Professor Chachu, if you can hear me, we will be now ready for your talk.